10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, long days and pleasant nights. Hope everybody is good out there. We are focusing on Marvel Comics Limited Series, the Sorcerer one shot, and the Fall of Gilead, issues 1 through 6. Like normal, I'm going to touch base with my co-pilot at the moment. What's up, Steve? How you doing?
Good evening.
Phil should be on his way. He usually runs a little late, but if not, it might be just me and Steve. Um, I'm gonna say hi to the chat. After that, we're gonna get into it. I will touch base with the chat before we get into it, like the heavy spoilers. I mean, this is a really long discussion, so hopefully you've read the source at this point. If not, just listen to us tell a story, kind of thing. Um, what's up, Hungry D? How you doing? Thanks so much for the 3 likes. um, what's up, Trev? How you doing?
My brother.
Ryan, one of the Tap brothers. What's up, D's Comics
D.
Corners? Glad to have you here. Thanks for coming through and the comments, man. And for now, I think that's it, maybe.
Yeah, looks
And that's
like it.
fine. We'll get there. We'll get there. Easy people trickle in as we go through. Um, all right. So the first one is this limited series one shot that they dropped in between all this stuff. He did 3 of them technically in between these arcs or whatever. The Sorcerer dropped in 2009 to give reference. It's still been pretty much once a year we're getting these, I think, at this point. Let me go back and check. Yeah, the last one was 2008. So it's pretty much been like an arc a year was how they were dropping it. Um, so the Sorcerer. It's a brief introduction of Walter. Explains he is the born son of Merlin. Mother was Selena, goddess of the Black Moon. Left at a mill owner's home in Delane as an infant, has a djinn for a sister, who is also his consort. Brought back to the moment Walter sends. The comic goes back to the moment where Walter sends Gabriella to kill Stephen. We learn that get the grapefruit is Walter's sister incarnate. She starts to suck the life out of Stephen once he gets it. Charles and his wife are kidnapped. Charles signs a letter of like admission for Parsons. What is it? His nephew. What's up, Carmen? Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah.
Um,
To get into the castle.
Yeah, James Farson, I think his name was. Martin stabs his wife. Farson's nephew is sent to Gilead to get the grapefruit. Godson is killed, of course, by Cord. Martin's sister galams Roland to kill his mom. Martin resurrects James Farson and sends it back to his uncle. Roland kills his mother. Martin's sister screws up Martin's plan and is forced back into the grapefruit and then specifically into the grapefruit form. Martin steals and delivers the grapefruit and gives it back to Farson. They ride away from Gilead to where Farson is posted out there. And the other part of this comic is behind the scenes of the Sorcerer from Robin Forth. And is just the story on why the Sorcerer, and Robin's curiosity for Randall Flagg, and basically getting to talk behind the scenes specifically about Randall Flagg and Walter and him being throughout not just the Dark Tower books but some of the connected Dark Tower books kind of thing. I
That's a
don't have
lot.
any. Yeah, there
That's
was.
a
I don't.
lot.
It is, and I don't have any questions on this one, but I will, throw this out that we did get the new information on, the grapefruit being like technically Walter's sister, that being like one of Merlin's
Merlin's daughter.
children.
Yeah.
And I was going to throw a question out there, but I mean, to me, this totally makes sense. This idea that that every single one of the orbs had this demonic presence that came from Merlin. And you think about those six demon entities that are out there.
Right.
Well, there would have been six bad, grapefruit, and possibly six good. I mean, the rainbow goes both ways, kind of thing. So
Yeah, because
reading
we've
that
got
and
the
getting.
Guardians, and then we've got the opposite. Yeah.
Mhm. So reading this and getting this new information about, like, because at this point, this was kind of new. Merlin being the father to Walter, but not so out of character that it felt weird or whatever. Now the old part was the mill and the lane that was established in the books, but we didn't know. I mean, we knew he was an orphan that was picked up by this mill owner. So getting all this new information, did this change your idea of Walter at all, or did it just fit? For me, it just fit. So,
Yeah, it just fits. As like Robin has been taking a lot of liberties to fill in. Obviously, Stephen King really trusts her with because none of this stuff is in the story. It's none of it is in the lore. None of it was even hinted at in the book. So she's taking a lot of her imagination and just kind of running with it, which is awesome because it seems to fit perfectly.
yeah.
I love exactly what she did here.
And I think I mentioned this before. This is one of those unique, and I mean very unique situations where we do have a continuation of a franchise or a project, or will give you that's done by someone that has a passion and a love for the
Yeah.
original source, and it's just so genuine and nice to see. That because this could have gone either way, especially with
Oh
Stephen King. I
yeah.
mean, being a Stephen King fan and going through his movies and his shows and stuff like
Mhm.
that, you kind of have like an anticipation. So getting a comic based on, one of my most beloved series, it's kind of it can be a touch and no, but so far this has been fantastic. Um, but we are going to move on. So our big arc in this one is the Fall of Gilead issues 1 through 6. Touch base at issue 1, and I love this cover, and we're going to talk about this too. But did
Yeah.
she run all this by him? Yes. It is stated at this point in the beginning, it was done through a conference, like, table office deal that went on with Marvel, and Stephen King and Robin was present. That was all the beginning, but that was like 4 years ago. At
Mhm.
this point in the timeline with the arcs, Robin is kind of at the point where she's going back and forth through emails with King. She's not necessarily getting to talk to him in person or on the phone. It's all basically through, emails back and forth. Um, but it's kind of due to her fault at this point with the comic series because she is in like unknown territory. Um, she's kind of at the point where she was running out of time on delivering these arcs because she was literally having to create a lot of this because there is some of it in the books. But like for instance, the Fall of Gilead, you're talking about there is literally like 2 sentence worth of merit that apply to this specific, moment in time. So she's literally having to create all this, and she at first she thought she could have done, but when it got down to it, the art, everybody was kind of waiting. Everybody was done with the art and like ready to go with this and this, and she still hadn't come up with the story, kind of thing. It was specifically with this art. This was the hardest part because this is the like, this and Jericho Hill are the 2 moments during this specific, comic arc series where there's just not a lot of explanation in the book, and King
Yeah.
is, like, the most vague about how the gunslingers fell, how Gilead fell, and how his Tet members fell. I mean, there's not a lot to go on.
Yeah, and she
Um
explains it in the back of the book too. She talks about her
Uh-huh.
correspondence with King in the back of the book. So each one of these,
Mhm.
so they don't really have much of a story in the back. It's just her talking about how she came up with these ideas and explaining what Mike was just saying about how there was no real reference information. So she had to kind of run with it with what
Mhm.
she knows of the core characters.
I'm glad you brought that up because this is the first time in all of these arcs. I think we're on the 5th arc or whatever, and there's going to be 6 out of this main series. But this is the first time where all these backstories are not like official side stories. They're just Robin talking about either the process of coming up with the story, the process of working with King, or that kind of stuff. But this is the first arc that didn't feature these glorious, dope, side stories, which is so disappointing. But okay, I think on this one the focus is the comic and this one because this is all new stuff, right? And this is
Mhm.
something that fans of the Tower have been waiting for a long time. Okay, so okay, so now we're in 2009. This series, The Fall of Gilead, actually dropped a year after The Sorcerer in 2009 to 2010. So we basically got a one shot during the year of 2008, and then a whole year later we start this arc. So issue one picks up right after Roland kills Gabriella. Roland faints. His mother comes to him and forgives him in ghost form. Sees all the pieces. Elaine, Cuthbert, and Aline leave Godson in the morgue. Stephen, Court, Vanny search Godson's room, finding nothing at first but a ring on his person, revealing that he was tied to Farson. A messenger dove flies in, revealing Farson's plans to steal the grapefruit that very night. Stephen realizes his key is gone and knows Gabby took it. Court stays and searches and finds a trap full of poison. And this is one of the dopest parts in the moment. But I can explain the trap because it is like a board that he pulls up that is revealed to have a book, and inside the book it revealed that it has all of Farson's plan for not only killing the gunslingers but destroying Gilead and everything it stands for. The problem with this trap, it is a psychically enhanced book. The book is actually blank. There is no plans inside. The book and what it is, the book is actually in a bag, and the bag in the book is coated in a poison, actually dragon's blood poison. Um, so it's kind of one of the you know the perfect traps. Like it's so good. All right, so Stephen finds Gabriella dead with Roland standing over her, and that's where this issue leaves off. And the side stories we get Poison Pen, Poison Book, The Fall of Cortland Andras. And then we get a side story about matricide. Okay, so the Poison Pen, Poison Book is how Robin came up with this idea that she knew she was going to have to kill off some big people in the Dark Tower series. As a fan of the Dark Tower series, this kind of killed her. And she also had to come up with glorious ways for these people to meet their demises. And I just got to knock at the door to see who it is.
Yep. And that, oh,
Hey,
hello,
everybody.
Phil.
Yeah,
Hey.
what's up, Phil?
Sorry for the delay. I don't know if you saw my message earlier.
No, you're good. And I kind of anticipated this. So you kind of showed up right on time.
There we go.
He tends to do that.
Mr.
I know,
Voice.
just like a wizard. We were talking about, we already did the sorcerer, and that didn't have any questions tied to that. Just kind of stated, that it was cool that we got, evidence that there was a demon that was literally inside, Walter's sister, was inside the grapefruit kind of thing.
Mm.
You have any thoughts on that? I kind of, I saw you side shrug.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed by this. Like, it felt like a filler issue, to be honest with you. But what really kind of, I think, did this particular story a disservice compared to the entire story was making at the end how it was like Walter was truly in love with Roland's mother. Like, it didn't kind of make a whole lot of sense to me, or maybe it was just the way it was presented. I don't know. It took away a little bit for me. And then, to me, then it would make no sense when he's like, well, I'm going to swear vengeance on Roland. It's like, really? Because when we start the Dark Tower, you're running away from him. So that's kind of the opposite.
Okay, so I fleeted over that in my kind of run back on the issue so much that I didn't even see it as a thing. And I want to say I agree with you because it's the way it's presented. It's such a fleeting moment that Walter
Yeah.
does that. I'm gonna get you rolling because you killed my love, And yes, that was not in the book. There's never a moment where Walter's like, "Oh, I love, Gabriella. That's why I really want to be with her." No, that has nothing to do with it. Like, I think reading the book, I don't even. I think it was a given thought that the way it was presented, situation wise, that Walter guaranteedly did not love Gabriella, like he was specifically tricking her to get to Stephen and Roland and what have you.
Right. I mean, my
It kind of
assumption
showed
is
that he was pretty mad at his sister for causing that glam in the first place.
That's what I
That's the
focused
part
on.
that he was really pissed off at, right?
That's what I've in my and I touch base on that. That's what I really focused on because that not only was it new information for the readers about his sister being the grapefruit and him being lovers with the grapefruit, which okay, give or take. No, but the whole thing that she kind of screwed up his plans, and for me it kind of works because that part of the book, even though it does fit into everything, and the longevity with all the Santa Claus, okay, so that scene always kind of came out of left field. Like, you do all this stuff and Magus, and then he makes it back with the grapefruit. You expect him to give it to his father, and then all of a sudden he just kills his mom. I mean, it kind of comes out of nowhere. So I kind of like this addition to it that there was more to it than the.
Yeah, there's closure.
What's up, Kenneth?
Hey, Kenneth.
All right, so we were talking about issue 1 basically, and Core getting poisoned. That's what we were. She gives this little side story and how she had to come up with the idea of killing all. Well, she knew she was going to have to kill off Court, Manny, and Steven, the parents of the other Ted. So it was, in this description side story, she talks about like, the ideas and her coming up with, you know, the whole fact that Court was surrounded, like most of Court's information is him being a trainer of the gunslingers, and then he was like the world's renowned riddle masters, or her taking the two. I thought it was ingenious. What'd y'all think about it? Like the
I
way
enjoyed
she.
it. I think it really um, spoke to a sense of Court's loyalty. Not that he discovered this book and everything, but what you start to see later on in the story, as far as he's like, hey, look, bring the gunslingers here, so let me be a warning to them that they know what they're dealing with. I thought that was very powerful. I'm kind of mixed. Like I kind of almost feel like he shouldn't have fallen for it, but at the same time, I kind of get it because look, you just found there's a traitor in your midst. There's a lot of things going around. You're not thinking clearly.
Yeah, he was
You-
excited.
Yeah, you're not too far away from my train of thought because I was kind of saying the same thing. You're talking about the best of the gunslingers, right? He's not just a gunslinger, he's the guy that trains all these guys.
Right.
But the way she presented it, I think it worked well because it was spur of the moment. They're all everybody's rushing around in this panic. I kind of like the way she presented everything because we're gonna get to some parts that I don't like about all this, but we'll get there.
Plus, there was a glamour on the thing. The magic got to him,
Yes,
right? See,
yeah,
Vanny was about the only one that probably wouldn't be affected by it because he understands the nature of these things. But
yeah.
gunslingers, pretty much anybody who picked that book up was going to end up doing the same damn thing.
And
As far as the
incidentally,
way it was written.
if he would have stayed in the room for another like couple minutes, he would have been right there with Court to find it, and Vanny would have,
Be right back. Sorry.
Yeah,
yeah,
and then I like those poison pages because that reminds me of a couple of movies where they did that.
yeah.
Remember the name of the rose with Sean Connery?
Yeah, and then it kind of
Poison
reminds me of
pages, right?
it kind of reminds me of the actual historical, like when and I don't remember which queen it was, but one of the queens was poisoned due to her dress, like they coated her dress in poison. You know, and she does go into detail about some of these things, like where she came up, Robin, where she came up with the ideas, and some of them are actually based in history, and some of them are based on
Yeah,
movies and stuff like that. But I
it was a
love that the
popular way to
name,
kill people, right? As poisons.
yeah, and it's already kind of been a huge thing in the books and the comic
Yeah,
book series, so it really does fit. Especially with a couple. I mean, 2 arcs ago, we had a couple side stories that were setting
talking about the
this.
poison.
Yep, the specific dragon's blood that
Yeah,
So I mean, it was well set up. I could say that.
yeah.
The very last like I don't even know if they're side stories. I'm gonna call them articles. It's called Matricide, and it's just about Robin. Talks about some qualities for being Stephen King's assistant, because at this time she's still not his assistant. That doesn't happen until like 2012, I think. She's like his first in command when it comes to the Dark Tower, but technically she's not his editorial assistant yet. So she's still kind of like fangirling at this moment, you know. Um, but she explains why she wanted to do the comic series and how, like, you know, how important it was and that kind of stuff. All right, so we are going to move on to issue 2. Roland confesses to killing his mother, but also explaining the glam of the grapefruit. Stephen finds the knife on Gabriella as they're taking her away. Roland is held accountable and is taken away by the gunslingers. Talk of a raven flying in with a sack, which we saw previously. Gunslingers tries to. Oh, no, 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 no. This is something different. Okay, so there is talk of a raven flying away with a sack. This is actually featured in the Sorcerer. This is when Walter grabs it and turns into like a bird and flies away. And I thought this was real ironic that the person that was trying to shoot it is actually struck down by lightning. Martin actually flings a lightning bolt at him. He's like, "You gonna shoot me?" Um, all right, so Martin Farson Goodson, seen riding near Gilead. Stephen decides to pursue. Meanwhile, Court, now bleeding from everywhere due to the dragon's blood poison, is slowly dying. Fanny, not able to counter the poison. Um, Shimi, still looking for Roland, makes his way to Gilead and has to teleport in, um, alerting security. They refer to Shimi as a not man. Tet goes and sees Roland in jail. Stephen and Tet lose Walter and crew and are ambushed by slow mutants. Robert Johns is killed in the process trying to save Stephen. The little side article is the art and discipline of creative continuity. And this basically talks about filling in some of the gaps, playing with the loose ideas, also explains some of the characters that seem made up that are not. Like, for instance, Aline Ritter is in the book. She's in both versions. She's in the very first Gunslinger. In the revised version that we read, she is only in one little bitty scene. It's in a dance scene. She dances with Roland. In the original version, she has a more fleshed out scene. She is like the bartender at the bar of Toll that he goes to. Um, and that's kind of why they changed it for the revised version. Um, Same things with James Farson. James Farson is also mentioned briefly in the book, so much that I had to go back and find him because I didn't even catch that. I thought he was a made-up character, and sure enough, he was in there too. He was an acrobatical musician, you know, nephew. So I kind of I appreciated that she kind of was getting critiqued by fans, and she kind of had to rebuttal and be like, no, 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 this is in the books, you know. Um, all right, so my first question, official question of the night, comes from this issue. Um, so, and Steve, this is going to hit hard because this is a new term that was brought up in this for Tower fans. But with the term "not man," describe what you think that means and what it ties to within the Tower universe.
Oh,
Sheeny was referred to as a not man, and it has a, you know, it's got a hyphen in between the man, like Spider-Man.
it was one of those
But
side stories that Roland was telling his Tet in his younger days when he was sent to that other village and the invisible guy that was floating around. I think that wasn't he called the Knot Man.
a not
Isn't,
man,
is,
yeah,
isn't that the one that I'm thinking about? That
yeah.
side story.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And this is the only other reference to that, but that officially, like I have no answer on what it is or what it means. My whole thing with the not man thing before, and I'll lay this on you and let this do. But I always kind of pictured Mitsapixel. It's kind of like an idea of a being.
Mixoplex,
Yeah, it's kind of like an idea of a being that like he
fifth
floats in and
dimension.
out. Yeah, and like the way they described him before is he was invisible and he just kind of teleported in and out, and that's why they couldn't really like. So the whole Shimi thing is kind of the same thing because he literally teleports into the front of Gilead. He walks up to the gate asking to go see Roland and crew, and then they don't let him, and he teleports in, and they're like, what the hell was that? You know?
Yeah, because they saw through him, and one of the panels in there, he was starting to like fade away and disappear.
Yeah.
So that's when the guy's freaking out, going, "Holy crap, not man!" Because it goes back to some of their myths, right? Even though
Mhm.
Roland dealt with one in that village where he had to find that invisible guy that was killing people, and then eventually they found him and then hung his ass.
What you thinking now, man, Phil?
To be honest with you, when they made the reference, I was just thinking it was another term for the
Who teleport, like a teleport person?
no, for the animal um, people hybrids that you see later on in the series.
Oh, the
Oh, the
team?
Tahini.
Yeah, I thought it was just like
Ooh,
another slang for
I didn't even
Tahini.
think of that. Oh
Because
man,
yeah, I
That
mean,
would be a
that is,
not man,
damn,
right?
that was
A
damn, I
man,
didn't
but
even
not
think
a
of that.
man.
Yeah, that's good.
because my thought was they're on high alert. Maybe maybe they think it's somebody else trying to attack.
Impersonating a person. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Okay, so my first thought before I had to pull up the reference was I thought it was something related to that. Like it was a command that they used to refer to an enemy that was inside the gates that was not of them. So I thought that's what they were. And then I was like, nah, it's got to be something else. When I looked up the reference and then went back to the story of it being like kind of like an invisible entity that teleports out, I was like, okay, this does fit. But like the use of not man, there has to be like some like lore or folk tales within Gilead that they tell each other. I don't know. I thought it was kind of interesting, and you talk about all the stuff that she could add. You know, this was an interesting offbeat thing, um, because I don't know if this is actually brought up in any other king, like as far as the continuity reference. I'm not sure. Like I almost went back and bought Hearts of Atlantis to see if they referred to the low man as not man. I didn't remember.
No, I don't think they did because I just read that
I don't
one
think
not too
so.
long ago.
I
Did
don't
you
think
guys
so.
notice, by the way? I think it's in this issue. I just had to go and bust it out. Um, the Pennywise reference.
Haha. That is related to one of my questions.
Oh, okay, never mind. Sorry.
No, you're good. And that's what I was gonna ask. During this comic strip, the arcs and everything, have you noticed the continuity connection? Because the books are heavily connected with music and other books, right? And his
Mhm.
other books. Um, have y'all seen moments where she has tried to connect either his other books or other literature sources or music? But the Pennywise is one, definitely. He was featured on the TV screen.
Yeah. Well, no, it
Or
was.
it's like a painting. It's a
Yeah.
painting.
I mean, to be honest with you, I didn't think it was the best use in this particular instance. Just because, if anything, I understand Pennywise is kind of in the background of this story at one point. I think, if I
He is
remember right.
connected. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
one of the demon guardians.
but just the way that he's depicted here, just like a picture hanging.
I
I
mean,
don't know why
like, okay, so,
it seemed so out of place. It took me out of it a little bit.
and it is for good reason because, like, okay, there would be reasons that Gilead would have, like, statues and pictures of the Guardians, but why would they feature like the anti-Guardians? Like the only place that would be featured is maybe like in Vanny's books, an explanation of, you know, um, but no, I mean I do like the Easter egg, but it doesn't fit. Like the only person in Gilead that would have that is like Martin, and that wasn't Martin's room, kind of thing. I
Yeah, I
want to
mean,
say
the
I had a
only thing I
Tina with.
could. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
What's up, Tina? No, you
Your
good.
genus.
I mean, the only thing I could think of is, because it's the beginning of the end, so to speak. Maybe that was kind of just supposed to be a little reference to that, or
So
maybe.
here, okay, so maybe you're on the right track. Because the way Pennywise works, is he kind of shows up places that are like that, like places that are about to fall, that already had kind of like Salem's Lot. Like
Yeah.
Salem's Lot was only accessible by Barlow because the town was already had that seed of evil there, and he crept in. Well, Pennywise kind of, a lot of his monsters work in that fashion where the seed of evil has to be there to begin with, and then the monster comes in. So like. Pennywise showing up at this moment where we are is kind of perfect, like, because I don't believe, if you think about it in context, and for those of y'all that know it, Pennywise, he doesn't just do glams, he's able to manipulate reality to some regards. So it's not to say that somebody in Gilead would have hung that picture. Pennywise himself could have literally put it there.
Yeah, doesn't he eat fear? Isn't that
Mhm.
really his sustenance, his fear?
One of them.
So that
Yeah,
would
but
make
that's the big
sense for
one.
him to be at a battle, right? So I mean, when Roland
Especially
and
he,
his
he,
cat see
he,
the
he
Parsons forces and they're shitting their pants, and I mean that's great food
especially he
for him.
gets off to like children's fear, and we
Yeah.
kind of, in a couple more issues, we kind of know what happens to the children again.
Hmm.
So I mean, this would be a big monumental moment for him to feed, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe the only thing I could think of is that maybe it was somehow a byproduct of the grapefruit itself. Because if you noticed, it wasn't Stephen who was putting up the picture. It was, just somebody like the look of it was kind of like, oh, how did this wind up?
yeah, it was like one of the
Let me fix
background.
this. Yeah.
It's one of the background guys. So my second question of the nine, because at this point we're getting into like multiple deaths, right? Big deaths, not just random
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
So with the fall of Gilead in full bloom, is this how you imagine the gunslingers were gonna fall? Um, from l- granted, there's not a lot of context, but within your imagination of like, Roland being the last gunslinger and him explaining that he came from this Camelot like, society kind of thing, and at one point they all fell. With after reading the Dark Tower series, is this in your realm of imagination of things that was going to happen? I'm talking about this, all the way to issue 6. We're talking about.
Mhm.
Phil, I'm gonna go with you first.
I mean, to be honest with you, I always pictured it was much more cataclysmic. I mean, this way does make a hell of a lot more sense because, typically the forces of evil work in shadows and they work behind the scenes with, less kind of in your face. Like kind of, again, you have the poison and whatnot. I don't know, when I heard initially, and I've been looking forward to reading this particular story since it was mentioned in the Dark Tower series. I just thought we'd see this big kind of cataclysmic battle, which we see a little bit of, but I feel like by the time, why don't we say Roland's quartet um, gets to the main battlefield, it's like, oh, we kind of missed everything, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of, and I don't know if you were here for part of that, but part of this goes into the explanation that she rushed, like she took so long coming up with the actual plot of the story because the whole rest of it she kind of had mapped out. And she even explains that she actually had the next arc mapped out before she had this one mapped out. She had the Battle of
Hmm.
Jericho ready to go. She had like treachery. I think treachery is what she mapped out first, believe it or not, like before the
Hmm.
Gunslinger Born. And so it's kind of weird. Like it's kind of interesting hearing how she like, I guess she was like, well, I'm gonna focus on how Roland killed her mom, and I'm gonna focus on, how this happened. But she explained that this was the hardest, and I get it. You're killing off a lot of major characters. How does this major civilization fall? Um,
Yeah, but
okay, so
I think that when you do it like that, you're in danger of of kind of not serving your character well. Look, some of these characters are great. Like you want to see these gunslingers going out like in a blaze of glory, um, and then you quickly realize that that's not how the Crimson King works. He's not a blaze of glory guy. He's a, well, let me just kill you before you even get to the battlefield
Well,
type
he's
of guy.
subtle, but Farson definitely is not subtle.
Yeah, no,
mhm.
Farson is the one that's going out and blasting the living bejesus out of everybody.
yeah, Farson's
Yeah.
the mad dog. Yeah,
And he's more
S-
and he's more of a military guy than poor Steven. I don't know. This whole series kind of paints Steven in a pretty shitty light too. Like
yeah, it
he's a
does.
piss poor ruler. He is a piss
Yeah,
poor
yeah,
ruler. He let the entire kingdom just go right to crap. He wasn't
there's
solid enough.
I mean, there's only like a couple real times, and I want to believe, like, okay, granted, we're still not seeing the full picture. Like, we're only seeing like because you imagine there's hundreds of gunslingers at his command, kind of thing. So why is he going out by himself, like to go
Yeah,
out? I mean, he makes a lot of dumb decisions.
bad
Like
Yeah.
decisions.
I want to say honestly, there's only like two moments where I can actually say, okay, that was king worthy, and everything else. I want to say the other 10 decisions that he made were really, really bad. Like, why are you doing that? Like,
Yeah, like why? Yeah, exactly. Like,
it's not, it's not
how
even,
did he
it's
manage to lead for so long and then have it fail so horribly?
I mean,
But okay, granted, she does paint that picture well. Like why, some of these, uh, okay, some of it I guess is belief, because some of it's like it's almost like a jealousy thing. Well, I'm rushing out to do this because I got to kill them. Kind of, it's almost like a. It's not. It did remind me of a kingly kind of thing. It reminds me just of a random Joe with a revenge stick kind of thing.
but you
Mhm.
know what? I'll say this though. It didn't. Stephen's actions didn't bother me as much because the way I saw it, I felt like Arthur Eld is the blueprint for Stephen. And as you can
He
see,
kind of is, isn't he? Because
yeah,
Arthur Eld made blunders as well, right?
yeah, all the crap that happened to Arthur Eld was because of his own actions, and Stephen is kind of in the same boat in that regard. I'm also going to say this: this is the first time I did not read the backup information like these things with Robin
Yeah, none of
because
us really did because they
That
yeah,
didn't need to.
and I should have
I
stated
started
that.
it and was just like, yeah, I
No,
mean,
okay, this was, and I explained that in the beginning. This was the first arc, and okay, so she was really behind. She was so behind with the story, like where some of the art panels were done, and she hadn't even given the script on what was going on. She states it went to the last week before print is
wow.
when, so okay, this ties into a couple things. It's one, it's the reason we didn't get any side stories. This is specifically every side story that we get, and they're not side stories, they're just articles. Is Robin talking about like this or that and this? So thank God you didn't. Not that they're bad reads, but technically you don't need to read any. It didn't pertain to the story or anything.
But I'll say this:
Um,
I missed it. Like I felt like there would have been a great opportunity to give more information on Farson. Maybe
we
some great
mentioned
opportunity why they have these elaborate traps and they or even why the Crimson King has a tank.
Tanks,
Yeah,
lots of them.
well,
Actually, it did kind of
we saw
explain that in earlier books.
we saw the
yeah,
tank
I
before,
remember
but
that.
it was just kind of there. Um, Okay, so this arc suffers from two things, and we haven't even mentioned the other thing. Um, but yes, this one does not feature those glorious side stories. And you're talking about we just went through 7 issues, right? And none of them features side stories, which we could have got at least one or two would have been nice, explaining who cares what. But I love all those side stories. The more lore we get, the more world building, more. I mean, and all this, like, okay, explaining like Steven's decisions and you mentioning that Arthur L was a blueprint. Yeah, agreeable, yes, because all these side stories that she's been setting up, explaining, Arthur L's action, his mistakes, and his prowesses and stuff like that. Um, the other thing that suffers, I don't, when we haven't even brought this up, is the art. And this arc, I don't know if y'all mentioned, if y'all noticed, but this arc specifically, the art is a very like it's still Jay Lee, but it's very loose and fast, and there's not a lot of detail on, any specific character. And we're talking about not even on Roland. Some scenes it was hard to be like, oh, was that Roland talking, or was that one of the other gunslingers? Like, um, and I'm not discrediting Jay Lee's art. All this ties into Robin just not like thinking she could do the plot, and then she really just kind of had a fart moment. She couldn't come up, and really thanks to her husband, they kind of last minute as they were like flying in to, meet up with the writers and the like Peter David, I think she was meeting. That's when they finally came up with the script on the traps and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, this arc does compared to everything we've gotten before. This one did suffer, and it's kind of disappointing because this is one of the big moments we've all been waiting for. I kind of wish they would have like postponed it just so they could have had more time to work on this kind of thing.
See,
But deadlines and
I
you can
saw it
tell.
as a. Oh, go ahead.
You can tell from reading this one that they watched some movies, because we talked about the Poison Pages that came from the Sean Connery, the Name of the Rose.
Name of the Rose, yeah.
And then the traps that they use on the castle, that's like Indiana Jones and the
Yeah,
Last Crusade.
yeah,
With
and
the
she
blades, the
mentioned that
spinning
her
blades and the
husband.
pits and all that shit. They were
Yep.
probably on the plane watching the movie and go, "Hey, put that in there."
Ah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that works.
What were you going to say, Phil?
I was going to say the art didn't bother me as much because I felt like there was more reliance on shadows here.
Mhm.
And I kind of saw that as, okay, well, you're in the dark days of Gilead. You know, there's a lot going on. You know, it almost felt like it gave it more of a foreboding kind of sense throughout the chapter. I will say this. I thought that in the Sorcerer, the first couple pages, I thought, oh, are we seeing an older Martin? But maybe it just might have been like more of an unpolished illustration.
Yeah, I think it was just the unpolished, like
I agree.
But okay, there is one scene that they show his other appearances from other books, and if you haven't read those other books, you wouldn't catch the references. But he is shown as, I mean, and he mentions his other names, but that they show him in walking dude form, and that's from The Stand. They do show him as Randall Flagg from Eyes of the Dragon, and I'm trying to remember his other appearance. It's such a low. It's like Cudgel or something like that. I forget what his other one is.
Yeah, I almost forgot. Did you guys also notice? Yeah, particularly when they're in. I assume I can't think it's the. I want to say cathedral. There's the stained glass of St. George slaying the dragon. Just they have the.
It's like in the
dragon
Great Hall or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like if you look in the background, like the dragon is about to devour Stephen, and then when you see Roland, it's like right when the saint is presenting the sword or something. I thought that was a nice
it's like a reflection of the portrait. I did catch that, but that's not Stephen. That's Arthur. That's Arthur Eld and that serpent that he killed. That like basically started Midworld. That's
Oh yeah, the demons that got through. That
came
came through.
I look at it saying, I see them.
Forget that demon's name. Hold on, I can pull it up.
Yeah. I don't know why I kind of always read it as St. George.
No, that's what, because remember, a lot of this is based off of Lords of the Rings and
facts,
Christian,
right?
Christian, so that it is supposed to mimic, like, I possibly Saint John. I wouldn't. It is supposed to be a historical like reference as far as religion is concerned, Christianity specifically, but like my Christianity, like as far as paintings go, I wouldn't know. But it is supposed to be a reference, especially because it's on stained glass, like, and that's not something that we knew they used. Like the only glass they referenced within Gilead was the actual like orbs and the glass that's in the Dark Tower windows, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Trying to see if I can find when it pops up.
Are you looking for that one scene?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if it's in.
But I like how they reference in the books. They talk about Arthur Eld and the gunslingers. Moving forward, were reading the technology from the past, and they were creating the plans for the traps for the castle, and they spent decades and decades perfecting this and reading from those textbooks and learning the technology and how it all works, and basically enlightening themselves. It's kind of neat how it's a mix of medieval yet modern technology, so that they could get the power to function their stoves. And
they were talking about like the electrical lights and the ice, like they had an ice cube maker.
And a refrigerator and stoves and all this stuff. Some of the technology that they actually did use from the old ones, because they basically wanted to have the weapons were completely forbidden, but then they learned about radiation and why people died touching these things or coming near them because they're radioactive, right? And how much life they have before those things will be usable again.
Yeah,
and that kind of explains how Farson gets hold of this stuff, right?
Right there.
There it is.
I found it.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Which book was that one in?
This is in
It's in
issue 4, but
4.
yeah, I think it's featured a lot. But that's what it is. It's Arthur Eld and him defeating that
killing the-
snake.
yeah.
Yeah, because that's what made him Den of of Midworld, basically.
Yeah. Then if you go like I'm going to say 2 or 3 pages in, from there you'll see what I mean. Where it looks like the serpent is about to devour Stephen.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what it's supposed to mimic. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. 'Cause
Foreshadow.
Yep.
They
I
love the
mean,
foreshadow. Stabbed in the back. Oh, wait. Treachery from
so
within.
we'll move along from that point. Issue 3, the students and people go to see and say farewell to Court. Aline is
Pretty
praised
rough.
by Court. Oh yeah. It's such a glorious cover that him dying of that dragon's blood or whatever. Ugh.
So it takes a week to bleed out, basically, and there's no
Yeah.
stopping it.
Aline is praised by Court, and he passes into the clearing. Shimi waited for dark to come and is eyed by some slow mutants. Fed up with man rules, Aline cuts her hair and dresses like a boy. And I need to do the quotation mark man rules. She dresses like a boy, discussing Aline's fate. Aline and Cuthbert hear Shimi. They rescue him from the slow mutants. They take him into the castle and feed him. Cuthbert is told his father has been killed and attends his funeral. While attending to Court's body, Vanny receives a late visitor and is shot dead as well. The side article is Aline Ritter and the female gunslinger. Robin discusses writing in a man's world. She says she always had a little easy due to her being a tomboy, basically. Like she always kind of lived both in, and that's why. So my question ties into the parentheses thing, the man's world limit that was brought on that we found out during the series. Was that in the books or was that created by Robin herself? And what I mean by this whole like, and specifically in Gilead, women are not allowed to participate in the acts of war. They're not allowed to know them. Pertaining to Aline in this story, like she was allowed to train as a gunslinger, but she would never be able to become a gunslinger due to those laws. My question is, was this even in the novels or was this specifically in the comic book series? And go Phil.
I mean, I would think that it felt like it was just added by the series itself. I say that just because Roland didn't seem like he had a hard problem recruiting Susan, as we saw in the regular series.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree, and I think we talked about this like maybe on the last arc or a previous arc because with Aline, it's cool that she's a gunslinger and stuff, but she's not the first gunslinger we've seen because of course we have Susan, my favorite character, and then we have the offspring of Carver and Calvin Tower, their daughters that are gunslingers. Then we have the whole like we have multiple stories of like gods within this realm that were women, like Oriza and the Grey Dick story. To my knowledge, I'm going to agree with you that I don't remember this at all, form or fashion. Okay, yes, we're talking about a Gilead that does have limits. It is a society that focus on posterity related to like your posterity as far as where you fit into Gilead. Like, they were very status minded. As far as like the whole remembering your face of your father kind of thing. But as far as like within the novel, as far as King putting like there couldn't be a female, gunslinger. For me, that's new kind of thing.
It was hinted at in the books because Calla Sturgis, if we remember in that book, when they're talking about that town, the ladies who flung the plates, they did it all in secret. They did it quietly because, again, it's a man's world, right? So that kind of hinted at it right there.
That is
That
true.
they weren't meant to be warriors or fighters, so they had to do all their plate throwing in secret.
I don't remember it being that big of a focus, though. Especially, I mean, to that point, we already had Susan being taught the way of the gun, kind of thing. Maybe,
But
maybe
all
you
the
know, with
farmers, you notice that it was all the males and stuff, and the females
yeah,
were kind of
no, you're
subservient. And
you're exactly right. You're
yeah,
you know, and I failed to remember that part, but the women did train in secret and stuff. And what I was getting at too, maybe Roland didn't have that sect as far as society was concerned, but the society around him did, you know, kind of thing,
yeah,
and it just wasn't foremost and forefront kind of thing.
yeah. He was more open-minded than other gunslingers were.
Mhm. Because I want to say it's not a huge focus of this comic series. Granted, it's only related to when it comes to Aline and and her whole story arc of wanting to become a gunslinger. I think it hurts more because she's the daughter of Court, who is the trainer of all these gunslingers. Um, and it's not like we have the choice kind of thing when we're talking about children. So it kind of just sucks in her favor and stuff. I'd like to mention that it continually sucks the way like you expect Cuthbert to have jokes towards Celine, and he's the one that's kind of like on her side, and it's Elaine that's kind of, hey, well, you could be doing more wife things or stuff like that, and it's kind of surprising coming from the non-jokester that he's the one having the issue with Eileen wanting to be a gunslinger kind of thing.
Hmm.
I kind of it's an interesting character dwell in itself there on its own, because all we've known from Elaine throughout the books is he's serious. He contemplates stuff, and then we get here, and he does have an issue with this. So it is kind of interesting. Um, moving along, we got issue 4. Stephen Shane plans on what to do presently about Farson and um, the recent events in Gilead. News comes that the people, upon learning Gabrielle's demise at the hands of her son, want him hanged. Most believe this is Farson's doing. Aline breaks Roland out of jail. Dr. DeCurry is gunned down by the same man that shot down Vanny. The doctor is Jamie DeCurry's father. Stephen, led by Justice and 20 other gunslingers, ride to confront a not ready John Farson, and realizing Farson is extremely ready and capable, Stephen realizes the trap and kills Justice. Aline and Roland head to court so Roland can say his goodbyes. He finds Vanny there dead, murdered. They start to investigate Vanny's murder when they hear Stephen DeShane blow the horns of Eld, and that's where this issue leaves off. The article on this one is the mini legendary Rolands, and this one kind of is important. In this article, Robin talks about Stephen King's inspiration for Roland coming from the child Roland to the Dark Tower came, the Robert Browning poem, and also how that could be interpreted as the first loop. She also mentions that there were also 2 other historical figures that Roland was based off, true Rolands in history, that surround, and that they could also be other possible variations of the loop, stating that one could be loop 2 and the second one could be loop 3. They wouldn't necessarily, it opens the picture that not every loop was the same identical thing happening over again. Of course, in Robert Browning's poem, it is a very vague and open to interpretation because it is a poem. But I want to say, as far as Stephen King laid it out, there is a lot of beats that Roland hits along that poem. But that's not to say that this isn't loop 1 and some of these other Rolands were different loops. Um, so that brings my question. The Robin brings up great thoughts about, you know, um, like what offered in other beats of fantasy, real life could be previous loops, explaining like kind of like every Roland that you've ever come across could be a variation of Roland Deschain, and Roland Deschain that we know is more like the best variant or something like that on those lines. This is the first time that this thought kind of like ever came to me. I never thought that like Roland, like from Charlemagne's history. could have been this Roland, but it kind of does make sense because that's the King Arthur and Tale. Like, um, what are y'all's thoughts on this? You know, the possibility that the other loops aren't necessarily Roland and Shane.
Multiverse.
Do you mean to see they're in some form or not present on these other loops?
That's where it gets tough. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would think he's there, but he's making different choices.
My only qualm in thinking of this, okay, because like this has been done before, this concept, and of course around this time there was a popular movie that did this, and I'm gonna mention the glorious movie that it was, Jet Li's The One. I love that movie. But that's basically what that was like, you know, one person, and there was like many variations of that one person throughout like multiverses, and he was trying to kill them all to become like, and basically he had like, you know, like parts of his soul would incorporate into him, so he was getting stronger. I
Like the
feel like,
Highlander.
yeah, and
There
I
could be
feel
only
like
one.
I feel like if this was the thing, right, that there would be pieces of those loops, right, to like tell the reader that this could be a possibility, right? And I don't feel like, although I do feel like Robert Browning's loop is there, like, and not necessarily loop. I just felt like it was more like a blueprint kind of thing. Um, I kind of feel like if that was if this was a situation that was for real, he would have had echoes of, you know, Roland from Charlemagne, or Roland from Scotland, or Roland from down the street that's going to 7-Eleven. You know, I feel like there would be some echo or something, the way the other echoes from those multiple Rolands or Jake is shown throughout the books, right? Because we do see forms of this with Jake, you know, having one version of himself alive, another version of himself dead, and then conflicting with them, you know, creating this paradox. So we have seen that. So I don't know if this is necessarily a possibility that I even believe in, kind of thing.
Yeah, and then going back to the talisman when we have the twinners, and the twinners, how radically different yet they're the same in the other universes. And then some of them are really, really close to each other, like in mannerism and in look.
And we've kind of discussed that because that's one of my great thoughts is twinners is a thing, and we're you know, where's Roland's twinner kind of thing, or we're just not perceiving, I mean, what Roland's twin is yet, kind of thing. Because or if certain key characters can have twins, and if that's the case, then I mean, because Roland does go through multiple versions of Earth, right?
Yeah, and there
So
could
like,
be versions of Roland that have died. Some of them might have died in Jericho Hill, might have died in the fall of Gilead. I mean, yeah, in the multiverse that could happen, right? So maybe he's the last one. Who knows? It's kind of like with Jake, right?
mhm. I want to believe that the concept is presented that there is twinners, and not only twinners, but other variations of characters
Millions,
within.
billions.
So it would have to be granted that Roland's are out there too. You know, I mean, they're just not as important as this one, kind of thing.
And we kind of
Um,
get that with the tower because when it ended and he looped, he didn't loop all the way back to childhood and being born again. He looped to the time where he was chasing the black man across the desert, the
yeah,
man
he
in
moves
black.
back to the gunslinger.
Back to that. Why didn't they loop him all the way back to the beginning? He didn't because
That's why I always ask the question: is the previous, you know, entries of Roland's life, is that part of the loop, or does the loop start at the gunslinger?
yeah, they want to correct something from the gunslinger on, not before that. Everything before that went the way it was supposed to happen in the universe.
Yeah,
And
I
then
mean,
he
kind
did
of.
something past that changed, and he needs to
Yeah.
change that. And they're going to keep looping him until he figures it out. It's like Groundhog Day. Keep
Yeah,
going over and over and over until you get it right.
yeah, kind of like we were talking about this a couple.
Dante's Inferno.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
we were talking about this a couple weeks ago, and I think it's just hey, look, Roland is maybe not. He's supposed to get it right. Maybe he's supposed to help other people, get it right. and that was the whole
Yeah.
end of the story. So I think this is actually like World Zero. Like this is the prime timeline here. This is before the split happens, where all these nexus of realities,
Earth
kind of
Prime,
converges. Yeah.
Midworld Prime. Right, because like in the multiverse, they give them numbers. We're in what 616, the
Yeah,
different universes.
we're in 1919, baby. All right,
1919,
so
baby.
my whole thing is that if this was a thing, you'd have to go research because I didn't. But if this was a thing, you'd have to go back and you'd have to find like three things. One, the easiest would be rolling, and that could be obtained easily. But two, there would have to be a tower within that universe in either form, the rose or the tower. So that would be have to be somewhere important in that story for this to be like a loop kind of coincidence thing, you know. And I'll tell you this, I know the Charlemagne tale, and that the tower or the rose is not like, I mean, you could say there is a tower in this story, but there was a lot of towers and castle related, you know. Um, I can go with either or, honestly. I could do with there was a whole bunch of different Rolands that led up to this Roland, and then that's what's going on. Or I could do with, hey, it's a Dante's Inferno thing, it's a repetition, and it's just the same Roland, and guess what? All other 18 loops he was getting it wrong, and this is the one loop that he got it right for some reason, or almost right, you know, kind of thing.
Trev
Um,
brings up a good point there. Is there multiple midworlds, or is this just one midworld?
The
That's
the
kind of
way
a
the
good idea.
story explains it is where the tower stands, that's prime zero. There is no other, you know, the tower only stands in one of those universes. Like if you go to New York and Midworld, you will find the rose, which is the tower itself, but you will not be able to get to the tower from that that what they call them levels of tower levels of the tower. Like I mean, so there is a mid-world prime, and that is, you know, I mean, yeah, it's just mid-world
Mhm.
prime. Like, and I don't even think it's called prime. It's just mid-world. You know, but, I mean, there could be. I mean, who's to know? Because the problem with that is the way the twinners work, and we do know. Okay, so we're talking about different planes of existence, multiverses, because there's
The
different
territories
Earths.
is one that they talk about.
Well, then you have that concept. Then you have the twinners. So not only do you have like an Earth, but it also has a twinner Earth. So every reality that's in the Stephen King's, you know, universe at this point has that there's different universes that each have its own Earth, and then they also have a twinner
Like
Earth,
they're
you
they're
know.
opposite one, like with the Guardians and then the dark side, right?
Mhm,
So we got the light side and we got the dark side of each and every universe.
mhm. What's up, Brian? Thanks for stopping by.
Yep, you got to vote, vote, vote. I think that's
Yeah,
running out, isn't it?
yeah, it might be time already. Today's the last day to vote for the CBC Awards. If you have not voted, go vote at CBCAwards.org right now. I know all of us have voted.
Yep.
All right, let's see. All right, so let's move along to the fifth issue. Stephen and Chris, Lane's father, are the only gunslingers that make it out alive. Back to Gilead, Roland greets them at the gate with Stephen injured. Chris goes to get Dr. DeCurry and learns of his death. They receive his own in the process, like Chris Johns is killed right there as soon as he finds that. And he says, "Closes at midnight, guy. You still got a little more time if you have not voted yet." Um, so then we're okay. Stephen Deshane is mortally wounded, but kills his attacker first and shoves him out a window. Roland, Elaine, Cuthbert, and Aline find Chris Johns and Dr. DeCurry. Roland rushes to find Stephen, but is already dead. Stephen left a message scrawled on the floor saying, "Open the pits." Roland holds counsel of an impending attack from Farson. He explains the pits are traps only used as a last resort. Cuthbert will arm the trap with other gunslingers relaying positions. Roland is crowned Den of Gilead, given the guns of Eld and the Horn of Eld. And that's where this issue leaves off. The article with this one is in the Defense of Gilead, the story of Arthur L. being a scholar as long as as alongside a warrior. Scoured Midworld for books, scripts on the old people and their technology, made a secret blueprint for traps, defense throughout the castle, spinning blades that come out of the walls, pitfalls. It took them 10 years to create and 10 years to perfect these traps, kind of thing. Um, this one's kind of like not really a side story and not really an article. It's like an in between. It kind of, because it does give us more information about Arthur L. But basically, he was into learning about technology and he came up with this idea of the traps. Um, so, my question at this point on issue 5, in this arc or during the series, can you name moments when Ka has intervened? I mean, Ka is a huge thing throughout the novels, and we really haven't touched with either Ka or Kef during these arcs. But has there been moments that have just passed by that where Ka has intervened?
I mean, I think definitely the first one that comes to mind. Now that I forgot it.
Well, you brought up a good one. You could say the Pennywise thing because that could be, a form of Ka. Yeah, I love that. The Arthur Eldon is old.
Oh, I think them deciding to send what's the gunslinger's name? His wife is pregnant. That Farson just brutalizes.
Charles.
Charles. Yeah, I mean, I think the
Charles
fact that
Champagne.
Charles's wife is like, nah, I want to have it in the same town as my mother. Despite the fact, and they even have that a little bit in the prologue. I didn't like, basically like, oh yeah, this is dangerous, but we're just gonna go. Like that's
You
all.
tempted fate.
Yeah, I mean that thing pushing her to leave despite the what's going on is caught on my mind 100%.
Well, I can grant you and say there's a lot of bad Ka that goes with all, but of course, there's a dark shadow that takes over. I mean, this is all like leading to a bad place. So this all kind of reminds me of like episode 1 and Yoda talking about like, oh, I could see it in the future, but for some reason there's a cloud that,
There's a
I mean,
darkness over top, shrouding everything.
yeah, kind of, and it's kind of accurate because that's what's going on. The Crimson King, it's laid out these tricks and traps, and they're finally, after I don't know how many years they're paying off, kind of thing. Steve, you got any moments of extreme Ka? Like, I mean, there's a lot of bad Ka. Is there any good Ka even?
Because I'm just thinking of the bad Ka too, because of all
Yeah.
the traitors in their midst too, right? I'm about the only good Ka is Aline there, Court's,
I was thinking that.
Court's daughter, because she and Cuthbert and Aline are the three of them. They're all the ones that are kind of holding shit together.
Well, you could say
that
that was one good moment of Ka for them because, like, they went and dropped off, Farson's nephew in the morgue, and like the second they leave, Martin shows up and resurrects him, does the whole necromancy dance thing, and like, I mean, you're talking about like if they would have been there a second longer, they probably would have died, kind of thing. Like, I mean, he probably would have struck him down with lightning and shit.
They seem to be in the right place at the right time all the time. To break Roland out of jail, and that was a good timing as well, because of all these the treachery, right? All these traitors in their midst, and that's the thing too. Stephen knew about that, but he didn't do a damn thing about it. That's the thing that kills me. He knows all this shit was going on, but he didn't fucking lift a finger to fix it. That's
the whole
part
thing
that's
with
driving me
Gabriella,
crazy.
like at this point, he hasn't even told his like closest command or the citizens to the point where they want Roland hanged because they haven't been told the truth. Kind of like, I mean, it's kind of one of those where I'm pretty sure Steven's like, well, what do I tell him? Like, he told me that the grapefruit made him do it. Like,
And my wife's been cheating on me for years, and I've known about it, and I didn't do anything about it.
Yeah, well, I was
an asshole, and again, he should have put a bullet through the guy's face.
I mean, how do you explain that? Like, yeah, well, I knew these two were traitors, and I've just been kind of letting them,
that's tomorrow's
chill.
problem, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
we're just gonna chill, that shows where he's kind of a weak leader, because a strong leader would be weeding out this shit and searching out and executing with extreme prejudice all of these assholes to
It's actually
make a
it's
point for
actually
the rest.
something that's never brought up, because we see a lot of forms of traitorism throughout not just the novels and the comic book series, but like as far as the good side's concerned, it's never brought up. Roland and back in the day with Hacks, they brought it to their attention, but
Oh.
it wasn't like
Sorry, guys. I'll be right back. I got something going on.
you good.
Yep, go for it.
But it wasn't like anybody, it wasn't like there was a policeman or a gunslinger that was close by being like, that traitor, bring him to justice.
Exactly, right?
No, but I mean, the only thing we do see is we saw the repercussions of what would happen to a traitor, and they hang them, I mean, which is kind of nice compared to like gunslingers, because I thought they only deal in lead,
Right, like take him out to the post, put him against the post, and shoot his ass.
shoot him. Like, why are they hanging him? I never had like that's something I didn't bring up, but we could have. That they do use other forms of death when they're known for just using lead. Okay.
But yeah,
So my other question was that question. The novels and music tied directly to the Dark Tower. Have we seen any of this in the comic series? And thoughts why not so much in the comic series? Because in the books, I mean, he doesn't just connect some or a little. There's a lot of literally. I mean, every book I think there's like 20 some references to other books, and maybe like 2 or 3 other references to music. And have
that's
you
true.
seen a lot of that throughout the comic series?
No, not really. No Velcro fly. My wife and I were just talking about that one before I came down here. She hates that song so much.
That's how I
But
got
that's
in.
kind of fitting for
That's
Cult.
that's the only way I know that song. And it's
For
funny, I was a
Lud.
ZZ Top fan, but like
Yeah.
finding out that song is so tied to the series, like, what's up,
It must
big
it must
movie
have
fan?
stuck in Steve's head, listening to that song, and he thought, you know what, I'm going to throw that in the book.
Yeah, I mean, because he used it for the drum thing, he used it for the, I mean, and it came back like I want to say like same thing with Hey Jude, but for some
Yeah,
reason
Hey Jude.
I kind of like the Hey Jude thing. It kind of fits in that whole like Western style thing so much that they used it for Westworld, and they did that with like the piano, and then they used it for like they did like a Western version of Nirvana's like Smells Like Teen Spirit and
Yeah,
stuff like
and
that.
then Susan singing those songs too, right?
Um,
I wonder if he had to pay royalties for listing all these songs in there.
well, I was gonna, after everybody was gonna be like, no, I haven't seen a lot of that. I was gonna go into it's probably due to, Marvel not having legal rights to these other books or music references that she might have wanted to throw in here, which I would have kind of liked that article, like, like, hey, what was some stuff that you wanted to throw in here that you just weren't allowed to, kind of thing.
Right, because
Um,
she was writing really serious stories here, and you're right, none of the musical stuff or the long-winded. Well, it's a comic book, so you can't really be long-winded in these. So, I mean, that's part of it there, right?
That too, limited space as far as what you can put in, because it's
I
not, I
didn't
mean,
count the
just
pages, but are they 32 pages in this thing, or is there more than
they
that?
are. They are. And I think that the Sorcerer, I think, is a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
I think the Sorcerer is a 90. I don't even think it's 90. I think it might have been a 60. It is a little thicker, though.
It is a little thicker. You're right.
Little. But I mean, for that time, it wasn't that much more expensive. I think it was the same price, like $2.99.
What, for the Sorcerer book?
Yeah, I think so.
It doesn't say on the front.
That's right, mainstream. Whatever you can.
Night Owl is sleeping.
Yeah, but I think that's the main reason is they just might not have had the rights, or they probably not even applied to do any of that. They might have been smart enough going into this, like, yeah, we're not going to be able to do any of that. I mean, like, because you even think about it, how come there's not any other Stephen King connected? I mean, there's two moments that I spotted out. There's one moment where he referenced the Pennywise picture, and there's another reference that referenced the Silver Bullet, the werewolf.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that they're very loose with the connections, and you think about like a comic book series and what you could do, and that I mean technically that there should be like Easter eggs galore in here. I'm not saying it would be a good thing if they did that, but like I kind of feel like it's a failed opportunity kind of thing.
There's the
Showing us
best
which
Easter egg right there. And with the horn,
wait shows. Oh yeah,
right? Like holy crap, Easter
such a
egg like
glory.
crazy. And
His
even
armor, his armor that he puts on with the in the issue 6 with the
yeah,
it has the crest of the
I know
yeah
it's
they
crazy.
I think they did a good job with all that.
Yeah, they did. Like I like the picture here with him right next to the stained glass window, and Arthur Eld is like right there.
Yeah.
Like that's awesome.
Oh, and okay. So fact about all this. So the fall of Gilead, right? I mentioned before. There's only two sentences to describe this situation within the novels. One being, as Roland does describe, the way his father died, and it's mentioned in the book that they never knew who the murderer was, but he was killed by Stephen Shane and he fell out of a window. So I mean, out of like all the things that she did create, she still was able to fit in, the one big scene that's throughout the
Yeah,
book
with
because
him
it
getting
does.
stabbed in the back, and then he blew the guy's face right off because he got the
Yeah.
gun and shot him out the window.
Yep. I was like,
That
oh,
was a
that fits. I was like,
yeah,
that's why nobody knew who shot him.
that was an epic ending.
All right, so we are going to move along. Issue number 6. 2 weeks until Farson's army makes it to Gilead, Roland, the young gunslingers, apprentice gunslingers, farmers, townsmen, like Aline, ready for the assault. They arm every body citizen to fight. Elderly and children are taken to the underpass under the city. 2 days earlier, Farson's army 2 days early, Farson makes it to the castle, and all hell breaks out. The traps do work, but due to Farson's army being way bigger than anticipated, the traps are basically null and void. Um, During the battle, the traitors within Gilead, look, I can make it big on it. The traders within Gilead's walls make it to the underpass and burn all the people hiding there, all the elderly and children. Roland and Gilead, people fight firm and stand tall, but Farson quickly overwhelms them. Overwhelms the gunslingers. Roland and a few remaining retreat to the underpass and are greeted by the traitors, who try to burn them but are out of fuel. Roland and others shoot them down. They proceed down to the underpass and quickly find the sad remains of the people of Gilead. They have all been burned alive. They retreat further under the underpass. Farson has captured Gilead. Martin changes the flag above the castle, and that is where this issue leaves off. The side article is planning the fall of Gilead. Robin explains that this was the hardest part due to the novel really not having a lot to go on, explaining how it was down to the last week before this went into print, kind of thing. Um, thank you very much, Big Movie. Um, so we go into my two last remaining questions. With the gaps now full on this event, does this line up with your thinking of Gilead's ends?
It sure did.
Yep.
I
I
kind
want to
of
say
thought
it
that
did.
this was a good way for them. I knew they would end up using weapons from the old people, and with the gunslingers just having pistols, weren't going to stand a chance against basically artillery. But I mean, there's one picture in here with them. They have bazookas, so they have they can just take out walls, and that's exactly what they did. And then just all those slow mutants they had for cannon fodder. So Farson was a good military strategist. He knew exactly how to attack them. He used all his fodder to go into all the traps, and then he moved his artillery in, and then just blasted the shit out of the castle. So
I want to say I actually like appreciate some of the things that she did, like adding the slow mutants, because it's just
yeah,
something that you didn't imagine. I mean, it's told that he was gathering like exiled gunslingers and pretty much anybody that could pick up a gun, but you didn't, there's just things that you don't think about. And having this, her adding the slow mutants in there, I thought that was a perfect addition to it. And it made sense, like, especially the way she was kind of adding them into moments around Gilead. I kind of like that, explaining like how that was how some of the gunslinger died.
Yeah,
Um,
somebody watched the movie Lord of the Rings with Helm's Deep.
right?
That's exactly what I was envisioning.
They
Was
sure did, and it looked a lot like that, just with
it did?
bazooka and tanks. I
Yeah.
like how they took out the tank then.
Well, they did have the gunpowder in that sphere, and they blew up the wall with it. So
Yeah.
same kind of idea with the bazookas. They're blasting the shit out of the wall, and then they breach it.
Farson's like, screw this. He's like, I like
Yeah.
how in the beginning of the fight he's all like, Martin's relaying stuff that he can see, and then his general comes in, which is a brand new character. And
Yeah.
he comes in and he's all like, hey, here's some other more obvious stuff that you already know, and he's like, damn,
The front
like,
line just got destroyed. I can see that.
right? I'm right here with you guys, and my eyes work.
So send in some more. He had plenty to feed to the traps, and there were so many that fell into the traps that they just basically drove right over top of the full ship.
I really love that because I want to say the addition to the traps makes it gives you the hope that they were going to survive this, that Gilead was going to overcome this, like, oh, there's these badass traps. Look, Stevens even mentioning that they need to use these, old traps that Arthur Eld has supplied, and
Centuries old.
then we get to the traps and like I mean they're effective for like a second, but like there's just so many bodies, like the pitfall traps become obsolete. Like they do take out the tank in that form, but that's all that does, is takes out the tank.
One
And then
of
the
the
rest,
tanks, because it shows pictures, there's multiple tanks there, not
multiple,
just
yeah, yeah.
one. So they just stand back and just start blasting.
Oh, and it is mentioned at the end of this, the Gilead is just, it's gone. It's in
Oh, yeah.
rubbles. Like, I mean, he did. I mean, it doesn't really explain that, but it does show the picture with Martin putting the flag on and
Yeah,
everything
the
around it is
eyeball.
just rubbles.
Yeah, well, it's a great scene in the book. They were with the eye, the big eye on the flag of the Crimson King flying over Gilead.
It's one of the things I haven't touched base on, but I don't know if I'm such a fan of Farson and the Crimson King having the same sigil. Not saying it doesn't make sense, but for me, it's just kind of lazy. Like you could have came up with like, I don't know, a different. Uh, he's got this cool ass mask. We could have got some, like maybe two eyes. Like
Yeah,
I mean,
maybe a variation of it.
let's make it like super obvious that this guy works for the biggest bad guy in the universe. Like he's got the same symbol. Like,
Yep, wearing the
eh,
mask and the whole crimson cape that he's carrying behind it.
yeah. And granted, that is a thing that is kind of like briefly referenced, but they kind of don't know who John Farson works for and what side he's aligned to, and that's kind of my issue with this. I mean, it specifically shows who's he's for the Criminal King. He wearing the eye.
And from his actions too, because he was going through sacking towns, destroying things. It's just like the Harriers are
Filleting
bold.
people.
Yeah,
It's like flaying people, like not only just killing them, but like skinning them
yeah.
alive and putting them on spikes and use them as flags. Like,
Hmm.
what happens to that Charles Charlemagne guy, Champagne Lane? I forget how, but man, that's horrible. What happened? It reminds me of like the Game of Thrones scene with the,
Yeah,
uh,
with Ramsey.
yeah, and this is years before Game of Thrones.
Yeah, way before it, but same kind of idea. But yeah, again, they're going more off of Lord of the Rings
Mhm.
kind of
It
thing,
definitely
along with
has
other
like,
movies too. There's a lot of different movie references in there, along with historical references that we've been talking about too. Because I'm sure those movies came up with those historical references from the past too. Because there were some bloody battles throughout our history.
oh yeah, you're talking about some of the worst like torture elements comes from like real life, and specifically Norse
Mhm.
and Roman.
Put them in the Iron Maiden. Cool.
Spread eagle, that dude, man. That's one of the worst torches I've ever seen. Ugh. Um.
Yeah.
All right, so I was kind of waiting for Phil. I was kind of stalling, but it looks like Phil might be preordained. So I might come back to this question. We got time. I do have one last question. So the Battle of Jericho Hill is next. We have very little knowledge on this battle. How do you see things playing out? Now, I know, granted, Steve, you already know how it's going to play out. But
Yeah.
my question for you, since you do already know how this plays out, did this line up with your imaginary idea of how it was going to play out?
I'm gonna have to read it again because now I've forgotten. But
Good,
I
because
think
that's
from the original time when I read it, I'm going, this didn't really go the way I thought it was going to go in my head. But that was okay because I'm still cool with how Robin did it.
I want to say I'm at the same level. I don't exactly remember. I remember I liked it, but I remember at the same time it didn't line up with the way I thought it was going to go down. So I want to say I'm in the same regard. So the next 2 weeks we're going to be reading the next it's 5 issues, and it's going to be fun because I don't necessarily remember like all of it. I remember pretty much what we're supposed to remember. Guess what? Spoiler alert: they all die except for Roland. Um, but that's kind of the we're going to see how they die because that was kind of the whole point of this was seeing how Gilead could fall on himself. I will say on this next arc, I do love the covers on these. Man, they went all out on every single cover of this.
It's what we call balls deep, baby. They went balls deep.
And this is what the whole series has been pointed to was this specific arc. I mean, we're talking about we're 5 arcs deep at this point. And it's all just been leading to these last 2 arcs, the fall of Gilead, which is kind of minor, but because I believe the fall of Gilead could have been roughed up in maybe not 2 sentences, but maybe like 5 or 6. Yeah, I don't think we needed a whole arc, to explain. But I mean, I'm not complaining either.
No, me
I
either.
I love all the okay, so this is kind of the fun part and not so fun part because we got some choices coming up because after the Battle of Jericho Hill, the arcs start over and we go back to the Gunslinger with the Battle of Toll.
Yeah.
But in between we have the Little Sisters of Illyria. And my option is after Battle of Jericho Hill, and before we start the Gunslinger, we're gonna go next in procession, and we're gonna go to the Little Sisters of Illyria because that's the way it does happen in chronological history is basically Battle of Jericho Hill, and then
It's
Little
supposed to
Sisters
be
of
the journey begins according to their thing, but you're right. Little Sisters of Illyria are right there too. That's the next one after the journey begins.
I don't know why they did because I mean chronologically it's out of order. Like technically
is.
Little Sisters happens first and then the
Yeah.
Gunslinger, and so I don't understand why it dropped like a year after they started. So we're gonna do it out of publication order, and
Okay.
we're gonna do the Battle of
Chronological
Jericho.
order.
Yeah, we're gonna do the Battle of Jericho Hill, and then we're gonna do the Little Sisters of Illyria. And honestly, these new 2 next arcs are the ones I'm most excited about. Little Sisters of Illyria is one of my
Yeah.
favorite
Me too. I love that one.
pieces. And honestly, I'm kind of debating on whether we need to read the real story before we do the comic. I feel like we need to do the real story before the comic. Like I feel like there's.
Yeah. Read the
I'm gonna have
book.
to debate that. I think because the book it's a
The
short
short
story that's
story.
featured in a bigger book. I think it's Nightmare and Dreamscapes, right? I think so.
Sure.
It's either not. I think so. I'm gonna have to double check that.
Oh. Yeah, because I just read it not too long ago.
That's such a great tale. It's
It
one of my
is.
favorite throughout all of the Dark Tower series, and it sucks that it's just a side. I mean, it didn't suck because of the time we got it, and it was like one of those times when we didn't have any Roland at that time, so it was a nice surprise.
Yeah. I like
Sweet.
Shimi's tale too, and I like the Evil Ground and So Felled Lord Perth. Those were
We're
good
getting
books too.
We're getting there, and I got those were filled in with the different arcs. Hell yeah, filled back.
Sorry about that little dead duty action.
No, no apologies needed at all, buddy. Real life comes first, always. I only had 2 questions related to the very end of the book. I did the bio and all that. Ask Steve. So my first question is, with the gaps now filled on this event, specifically the fall of Gilead, does this line up with your thinking of Gilead's end? Did this, you know, line up with your imaginary, off those 2 lines and how?
Not really. Like I said earlier, I was expecting this big kind of action movie, explosive kind of ending. This, again, I kind of felt like Roland and the quartet were sidelined for most of it. And it wasn't so much as a, I think I was just waiting for this big battle when what this really was an assassination on a mass level.
I can say I do agree with you because I don't think I mentioned this before, but my fantasy version of this had a lot more horses and a lot more like actual gunfights related to, for some reason, like, and I'd like not to quote a film or anything, but I kind of envisioned a lot more of Braveheart, like that kind of style of ending
Yeah.
battle. Okay, now that we've gotten there though, and this is what we got, is it bad or good? Does it still line up with?
It's a little bit less than what I wanted. I'm reserving final judgment until we read the next chapter because I feel like this is the wind up, and now we're going to see the actual punch.
You're right, because then I mean, the big part of this is finding out what happens to Roland's Tet, right? I
Yeah.
mean, learning that we already knew he was the last. We already knew that Gilead failed. So I think all that's kind of minuscule, but hearing how his first Tet fell, I think that's kind of like more important to readers when you hear about it, kind of thing. Well, how did his first friends die, kind of thing? And knowing what we know of Roland, was he a part of how they died, kind of thing? Were they decisions based on his need for the tower, or or was it God? Was it the tower saying, "Hey, these aren't the friends you need"?
Mm. Yeah, I think all in all, I was expecting this to be much more action movie, and this was more. It read more like a Greek tragedy.
It was like
Yeah.
one fall after another. Okay, this guy dies. I want to say,
Massacre.
yeah. I want to say it's kind of brilliant in its own right because it could have gone either way. It could have been this big, long. I mean, each issue could have just been this. Oh, Farson got here that day, and then all 6 issues was just like, battle scene after battle scene, and how, and I kind of would have liked that too. I kind of would have liked, seeing Stephen dying, gloriously versus being stabbed in the back, or like I could envision both. But I kind of want to give it to Robin in one respect that like it kind of comes off as like, I was telling Steve with the trap thing, she layers in these like layers of hope, like with the traps. You kind of got this like, oh well, Steven kind of mentioned that there's these traps. Roland mentioned that there's like Arthurian blueprints that explain the trap. It's got to be some cool. So you kind of get that maybe there might have been some, and the way she lays it out. Now there's no hope. There's just, the bulldozer's here to run you over, kind of thing.
Mm.
So I will give her credit. It's not. I will agree. It's not the ending that I envisioned or maybe wanted, but I will grant that she did a good job. Like, as far as like how it could have turned out and how it could have laid out. I want to say there is for me, maybe not everybody, but there is a level of rushedness when it comes down to it. Like, especially with the last book, it was like, oh, here's the traps, they're done. Oh, here's farces, they're done. Here's some of the last gunslinger. Oh, they're dead.
Yeah. See,
Um,
to be honest with you, if they got rid of the prologue, the Sorcerer, I feel like they would have had a little bit more room to really give this story a little bit more meat on the bone. Because like
Put a 7th book in.
Right, some big things happened, but it just was like, I think because it was rushed, or just because it was just kind of there, you didn't really get the full impact.
Well, I mean, granted to that, there's no like for me, there's no s- like for instance, when Stephen's killed, that could have been a moment of great grief and loss and sorrow, not just for Roland, but Gilead and everything, and then that's kind of lost in the commotion because it's a very fast moment, and that's just one specifically. But you're talking about we lost a couple big. I mean, Court. I don't know about y'all, but Court was pretty big in my mind. He's one of my favorite characters. Like, it's just getting to his death, and I'm not saying that she didn't do his death justice, but like, there could have been more weight added to it, kind of thing.
I'll say this: I think Quartz was the only one that I thought was handled in a good manner. Like, I feel like they added more to him, and he kind of, he like I said, to the end, he was more interested in, hey, look, I'm gonna die, and it's not gonna be pretty. So remember who you're dealing with.
I loved all of it.
Yeah.
I love the whole the pride, him holding, him still wanting to do the job even though he was dying. Like, no, I honestly, in my regards, both Vanny and even though Vanny's killed off very quickly, I kind of feel like he needed to be because of how intelligent he's supposed to be, kind of thing.
So,
Like,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, for me, both of their deaths, like the way she handled them and presented them, not only did they line up with my imaginary way of them dying or whatever, but like the way she presented it worked for me as well, kind of thing. With those specific two deaths.
The
Yeah.
thing with Vanny and with Steven that bothered me, it's like, hey, these are big characters. You're not going to have Farson do it, or one of his somebody closer to him. You're going to have basically like red shirt number 2.
I will agree with you there. I didn't
Yeah.
like that. But I think in regard to that, and she does touch base with Steven's killer because it is a different guy that killed Steven. Um,
Yes, it didn't even register for me.
he's the there's no explanation on where he
Yeah.
came from. They show that there's three traders. They focus on one of the traders, and we know he kills predominantly like most of the people that are either stabbed or shot. But the other two, there's not really like detail on their face or whatever. The guy that killed Steven. But granted, it's because in the context of the way Roland describes the way Steven was murdered back then, that they never found out. He didn't know who his murderer was. But that's just that one case. Like, I feel like she kept that throughout this, and she didn't have to do that. But in hindsight, if we would have found like if she would have presented it with a badass killer or something, that tale would have been told. Like Roland would have like mentioned this, like all at the fall of Gilead, there was this big motherfucker that came and he just took us. None of us could take him out. I think that would have been a tale that would have been passed down, kind of thing. So in that regard, I think the red shirt number 5 guy like thing kind of worked. I'm not gonna say I necessarily like that. I would have preferred. I honestly, and she kind of did it at the end. I would have kind of preferred if we would have got like Goodson, James, and the other guy that
Mhm.
shows up, the Farson's lieutenant, that's all in nice armor. I would have preferred if like he had slipped these agents, but they had these like gooky gimmicks, and they were the one to kill. Maybe it was like an ex Jonas type of character, like like a guy, somebody that had a detailed past with Steven. I think would have been and necessarily we didn't, they didn't need to find out who this character was, but the reader, we could have, it could have
Hmm.
been a new no-named, Jonas kind of guy, or they could have used Clay Reynolds because at this point they did kill off Clay, but like, I mean, in the books, he was still left open-ended, so they could have used him.
True.
Yeah, the books themselves are all a tragedy too, so you got to remember that. So the comic books are kind of following in suit with the tragedy of the whole story.
And I just would have thought it would have been something like maybe there's a tank that's really doing them dirty, and maybe this probably would have been a death more fitting for Kurt, where for Cuber. Sorry. Um,
Farson.
and no,
For Stephen and Vanny and Court and
Court. Yeah, like I could
I,
see. I could see Court like, look, I know I'm going to die anyway. Just give me a whole bunch of dynamite. Let me run at the freaking tank, or give me some explosives. And
Okay, so that's in another. I was just when you were going in that realm, I kind of thought we were going to go in that regard because the book hints that not only does Farson's army have older technology that he's trying to figure out and use because we have the gas tanks and the mention of tanks in the books, but he was the only one because we have the TikTok man, and I mean they found the Nazi plane, and they were trying to figure out how to use the machine guns, and I mean so we have other elements. So it wouldn't have been so far stretched to have this like moment when like a German tank showed up and that like gunslingers tried to fight it, maybe not knowing that it was a steel enclosed tank or what have you, Um, and like you said, Court running out there like, no, well, none of our guns are working. Let's try dynamite, and and that I honestly, I kind of would have preferred something like that. Like, yeah, I would have preferred more use of the futuristic technology because yes, the bazooka is used, and yes, we see a couple tanks,
And they
but
talked
like,
about lasers and stuff too, and nuclear weapons and other stuff that was found as well. And they
yeah,
didn't use any of that in the books.
and we do know that that plays a big part of the fall of Gilead because all of Gilead after that point is scorched earth. Like it's all like radiated and it starts leaking out so much to the rest of Midworld from that point on. It's the third time in the storyline and historical reference where Midworld goes back to a radiated state. And she didn't, I mean, okay, maybe in Jericho Hill but that, no, I don't think we're going to see these weapons of mass destruction that I can remember.
Yeah.
I feel like that's for me that was kind of a letdown is we don't have like these. It's not like these lieutenants or generals that are killing these famous gunslingers. It's like you said, it's red shirt guy number 5. And not that there's anything wrong with it, but it's just an imagination wise, especially in the realm of these books and stuff. It would have been cool to see like kind of a wolves Akala thing, not
well,
necessarily the wolves, but something like that where it was like, yeah, I mean, especially with Marvel Comics and these doom bots already existing in the dark, we could have seen something in that realm where it was like the fake Galactus type robot showed up, and it could have been like a crossover like that. I feel like they dropped the ball in those
well, the whole
regards.
thing with Steven specifically is that he's supposed to be the guy, you know, and you don't just send you to hear that the guy gets taken down by just some dude. It's like I don't know. It takes away from his legend a little bit. I mean,
So,
granted, she slipped in like, oh yeah, he was a little bit drunk, but still.
so me and Steve kind of briefly talked about that before you showed up, but we had both commented on the decision and partly on, and this is probably all Robin, but Steven kind of comes off as a dumbass, and in the books, he's supposed to be leader of leaders. That this is the face that Roland's remembering, kind of thing. What he looks up to, the model that most other all gunslingers were modeled after, kind of thing. That statue that we saw and fucking with Blaine might have been, you know, um, Steven. That gunslinger statue.
Mm-hmm.
So in this series, and yes, granted, all this leading up to this horrible event of the end of the Gunslingers, but like we were just talking about, like every decision. I mean, there's two times he makes okay decisions, but every other moment, and as far as a king or a den is concerned, he's making some like really bad choices. Like, hey,
And where the hell are his
Farson's.
advisors during all this? Like you would surround yourself. If you're a
Dead.
great din, you would have great advisors around you, plus a guy who's your spy, your assassin. All of these people should be there, and they're not.
Well,
Like
yeah, he
moments of.
sent them away to go, which was dumb in itself,
Yeah.
and they got picked off.
And you're talking about like, okay, like you're talking about War Room, right? Who would be there? Well, Vanny would be there. Like
Court would be
Court
there.
would be there. Martin should be there as the sorcerer. Like you're talking about like, and it's not like there was a moment where Steven's like, Bring me court. Bring me. No, we don't even get that. Like where he's not even like utilizing the tools that we have known to have been there. Like, I mean, yes, it does give us this situation of the fall of Gilead. I get it, but at the same time,
It should
like
be a
the
more equal battle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
yeah, and okay, granted, these are the only moments we've gotten to spend time with Steven. And like in this regard, it's kind of a disservice on how he's been portrayed in this very short time that we've gotten to be with him because he's not really present in the books. Like, yes, he is in Wizard and Glass for like a couple moments where he sends Roland away, or and I will say we get a lot more depth as far as like the relationship with Steven and Roland within this comic. Like there is moments where Steven is grateful that Roland has came back, the way he talks about Roland, stuff like that. We didn't get that in the book, so that's kind of nice. But at the same time, the way you're portraying him as the King of Kings and Midworld is kind of on another level. It's almost like Shimi's running things, kind of. Like I mean, the whole fact of like, and I get the whole like, adding the matricide thing and the sorcerer portraying, but then it's like this whole like, why would Steven hold that? Like, why would he not hold a council and be like, look, we got this sorcerer, and I don't know what the fuck to do about him because he knows magic and stuff. But like, why wouldn't he tell like his Tet like that? Like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't they? And especially because, and I'm not talking about Gabriella because Gabriella is a short time frame for him. I get that, but he's explained that he's known about Walter for years, and like why at some point you got to think like he would have gone to Vanny and been like, man, I need some kind of defense. This guy knows magic, and I mean,
Yeah.
like,
Grab me some Manny. Grab those people that are on my side. There's got to be a good version of Martin,
we're
right?
talking
Same
about
thing
the
with the
cat.
spies too, because we saw that with Farson. He's got his spies going in.
Mhm.
Stephen should have had his spies as well, and he didn't even talk about that at all. Like he should have his own spy master, his own assassin people. Like everything that Farson has, Stephen should have the opposite of
See, the only
to
thing I could
counter it.
think of on that, and this is kind of going back to we're waiting for this big battle, but in the meantime, Farson's killing off everybody with poison and whatnot. I don't know if it's supposed to be kind of like a line of delineation, like, hey, we're the honorable and respectable people. We don't have assassins or spies or ninjas or whatever to do dirty work. We do our own dirty work.
Okay,
Right
so
on the
we
up and
do
up.
know, and I'm glad you're bringing this up because we do know that does play a part. They are, the way the gunslingers society is built on a pride status. They're built on an honor system. They're built on a So I would say that there are things that they wouldn't do, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't be knowledgeable of them because we do know that they don't use poison, but we do know that they have vast knowledges about poison to the point
And
where
how
they
to
got,
counter them.
yeah,
Right?
they got
That's what
poison
Vanny talks about.
tasters.
They have classes on this stuff. When the gunslingers are trained, they're trained on all the opposites of everything that the enemy can do to them. Right? That's part of
It,
their training.
it's kind of my opinion on adding the man world rule into this comic and not being really in the novels. And I'm not saying it's not there, but it being an issue is so much she's made it in the comics. And to me, it's ironic because you're the writer that's giving us the story, and you're creating an issue that you have a problem with yourself. It's kind of the same issue with Steven because we know Steven to be something other, and in your minds you just have this image of the way it would play out. the eh, when you start walking in like too many holes, in a story's narrative, it starts creating big issues kind of thing. And with Steven, it does create because I don't, there are a lot of times where I'm like, why would Steven be doing this? Like the second he heard about Farson being camped near Gilead, why would he go out there with just 10 or 20 gunslingers? Like, why would he not send his whole army? Which that's kind of another issue that they never show us is does Gilead even have an army? Like it just looks like they have like 10 gunslingers hanging around
Yeah.
this massive castle, and that's it. Like
Yeah, that was my
which
impression.
which
Yeah,
kind of
there's no military force, so like this kind of is weak.
like, and
Very
it
weak.
kind of like, cranes the hugest problem in this whole theory of like, the gunslingers were wiped out. Well, were they? Because it doesn't even seem like they were there. I mean, was it just Steven and a couple I mean, because you're talking about this paints like a more pathetic, like they were just on their dying last leg, and the way Roland explains it in the books is kind of quite the opposite. It came from this glorious, thriving community that somehow this bad seed spread throughout the rest of Midworld was able to amass an army and take them over. And I want to believe in this regard, it kind of just makes the gunslingers, like push over. Like, I mean, you're talking about these are supposed to be the knights that guarded the realm, that guarded the Dark Tower. Is this the same knights that guard the Dark Tower? Like, and to me, I don't really think so. Like,
See, the only thing I could think of as far as why all this went down could be one of two things. One, either the events of what's been going on, Roland going, getting the grapefruit, all the, everything going on with Stephen's wife distracted the core enough where Farson was able to say, okay, well, now's the time to move and move effectively. Or it's just that the Roland that we're seeing is one who, when we talk about you've forgotten the face of your father, maybe when he's going back and looking and thinking about his father, he's not thinking about his blunders or his shortcomings. He's thinking about him at his best.
that would be a true sentiment, though. It wouldn't be, I mean, because in this world they still have the same ideology as us. We're
Mm-hmm.
not born perfect. You have to train. You have to strive. So I would agree with you that that would be there, that when they thought about their their mentors, whether it be father, mother, regardless, like that they would be focusing on those moments that, they knew to be either glorious or, mannerism, or,
Yeah.
what have you.
But even, when you think about it, though, too, on more of a mechanical level, I mean, maybe it's something that Robin just doesn't connect, just because we see this. And then even if you think about it in terms of, when this book starts after the prologue, there's, it almost feels like there's a touching moment between Roland and his mother where he understands her.
With the ghosts.
At no point during the proper Dark Tower series do I ever get the impression that he understood his mother. I always feel like he's still carrying around a little bit about that resentment.
And you're right, because we don't get that resolve until book 4.5 or book 8, when in the keyhole, because remember the that's part of the story about what was in the letter that he
Yeah.
received from his mom from Nebaria, and he was mentioning that he forgave her, but that's as far as that went.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, as far as we know in the novels, and this is my understanding, Steve, dispute me if I'm crazy, but no, he found out his wife, his mom, was a traitor to Gilead. He did not condone her actions, regardless of what his father, knew, because it is revealed that his father knew. Um, and the way the murder went down, yes, he was tricked, but he did not see it as a bad thing. He still saw it as, he was taking out an opposition to Gilead kind of thing, like he was taking out a bad force.
Yeah.
And it's not until the eighth book that that even becomes a thing that I want to say you as the reader even thinks about, that like, the forgive, repent kind of thing regarded to Gabriella and Roland, because he hasn't brought it up in that regard. His whole regard in that regard has been Susan. Like I fucked up back then with Susan. Like it's never brought up that like, oh, I fucked up with my mom.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I want to say like, and that might be like because Robin is not such an I mean, she's not written novels. She's not, this is kind of a, fan fiction come true situation, where she's just been allowed to come up with a plot with this. So I want to say like, you know, that the writing, some of the writing kind of painted, backed her into corners kind of thing. But okay, and in Robin's defense, because I overall love this series, I do think it's canon, and that's up to each and own. But I want to say that she does paint the steps leading up to these things very well, that they are semi believable. Yes, Steven's making dumb decisions and blah blah, but that kind of like goes into how her picture of this kind of lays out kind of thing, because I do like how she presents a lot of the commotion that going on, like somebody going to see the doctor and bam, that's how that guy dies because the traitor's still in there with the doctor. I do like a lot of those situations, even though they're not exact. Like you can kind of think your way out of a lot of those rooms that she's put us in, but yeah, I mean, so I could say that it could be a lot worse. Let's just say, kind of thing.
Oh, definitely.
Um. So my final question, I did ask this to Steve, but my final question is: we're about to go into Jericho Hill. That's the next arc. Um, what are your thoughts on that? Because pretty much, you know, with Jericho Hill, all we know is Roland forgets to, pick up the horn. He's got the horn at this point. He forgets to take it, and this is where he forgets the horn. And we also learn that this is where his Ted, finds their end. And other than that, that's pretty much all we know about Jericho Hill.
Um, I mean, just
And if
kind
you
of
need
going to it open-minded.
if you need questions related to it, I could throw you some. Like, what do you think we're gonna see Farson die? Do you think he survives?
I think we are going to see Farson die, but I don't think it's going to be a final death. As we saw, Martin can bring somebody back pretty easily. It's a given, of course, that we're going to see the quartet itself fail. I'm interested in seeing, how we see Aline in action. I kind of don't understand what the point of her cutting her hair and disguising herself as a man was after Court died and just said, "Hey, look, you're right. We need women gunslingers." And at
Yeah,
this
that didn't
point,
make sense
too,
to me either. I don't know
yeah,
why they did.
Okay, so I'm glad that you're bringing this up and not me. Thank you, Phil, because I didn't want to touch base on this because it's okay. Like I don't want to come across as like a woman hater or someone that doesn't like this idea, but it does in context it does come out of left field. Like this
yeah,
is y'all just mentioned two big things. We're going off a story that this like Robin presents this man world's issue where women can't learn law. Okay, we do see that Aline is above this, that she's not even that regardless of what the law says, she's still trained to be a gunslinger. That's there. Then we go into the scene where Court dies and Court gives her his approval and he's like, no, you do you continue to be a gunslinger. And then right after that, she cuts her hair and like, oh, I want to be a boy because that's
right,
gonna get me. And this is going on when all of this like, hey, why like Court just died, Vanny died now, and Elaine's dad just died, and that's when like like okay, yeah, okay, I have to give her like some benefit because she has the greatest outlook that she thinks the Gilead's going to be there for her to become this boy, to become a gunslinger. She's got like one of the best outlooks I've ever seen.
yeah. I mean,
I-
it would have made more sense if she did this
in the
in the last
beginning,
book.
no, in the beginning, like the second we met her, like if this was an
Yeah,
established thing that I feel like it's going into the whole like Robin putting herself in the a room that she can't write her way out of because for me it wasn't needed. I mean,
Yeah.
Aline at this point was already like we already know the taboo when it comes to the females. We already see how some of the other characters treat her. Like, what purpose does it serve, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Especially
I
because
mean,
you
yeah.
can kind of guess what's going to happen to her, kind of thing.
And look, Roland it's pretty much just Roland and the guys now, as far as the gunslingers go. She gonna show up like, hey, look, I'm really in disguise. See, I could fool everybody else into being gunslingers. They're gonna be like, yeah, well, they're all dead, so it doesn't
That's
really
the
matter.
point.
Yeah. I mean, if she wanted to just do a scene that we've seen in, so many movies where the female lead, like that falling third act, where it's like, all right, now I mean business. I'm gonna cut all my
She
hair and
goes badass mode.
exactly
Arya in Game of Thrones.
right.
Mhm.
I could see that. It doesn't mean that I think it has a place here, but I could see that here. It's just like after the fact. All right, everybody's dead. Let me pretend I'm a boy.
Okay, so we still do have an arc left, and I can say this could be, Robin setting up, I'm gonna just lay this out there, but this is kind of one of the arcs from Lords of the Rings with the whole Witch King thing. Like I can't be slain by a man. Well, I'm not a man. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, I don't remember a lot of Jericho Hill. Like I remember a lot of the first three arcs of this series, and that was pretty much it. Everything else has been like a big refresher because a lot of this I'd forgotten. Like I'd forgotten about the whole trap thing with the fall of Gilead. If you had asked me how it was going to go down, honestly, I couldn't tell you until I read this because I'd forgot it. Um, so there is there's still like even though I have read this, like there's a whole lot I don't remember about the next arc that's coming. There's a couple threads that we haven't seen finished yet, like the
Yeah.
whole resurrection of James, and Goodson. I don't see the purpose of it yet. Like, why bring him back? Like, it served its purpose to be there with the riddles, him getting caught, and cheated kind of thing. But I don't see the reason why they brought him back. He doesn't play a big role in the book, so that part can only go so far, kind of thing. And I don't see him playing a big part in this big battle of Jericho Hill thing. He's not a fighter. He was like an acrobat slash musician.
I mean, the only other thing I'm interested in seeing really too is I'm assuming we're finally going to see how Shimi becomes depowered from what he is.
Not yet. That
No.
actually happens. Okay, so I was kind of explaining where this is going next because there is a little bit of confusion in chronological history as far as the comics are concerned. So next up, we're doing the 5-issue Battle of Jericho Hill, and that technically ends all like the new stuff that Robin has done for this. Okay, so what they did next is they they go back to the gunslinger. So the next arc in this series, what is it called? The Gunslinger.
It's
The
called The Dark
Journey
Tower of the
Begins.
Gunslinger, The Journey Begins, Little
Yeah.
Sisters, Battle of Tull, Way Station, Man in Black, Shimi's Tale, Evil Ground, and So Fell Lord Perth.
So technically, how we're going to do it is next up, we're going to do Battle of Jericho Hill because that is next in chronological order. But we're not going to do, after that, we're not going to do the Gunslinger, The Journey Begins. We're going to do Little Sisters of Allura because chronologically that happens next. After Battle of Jericho Hill comes Little Sisters of Allura and then the Gunslinger. I don't know why the comics did this. I love that they did it because Little Sisters of Allura is like a little side tale that not a lot of people know about because it's a short story that's featured in just a side story book that he did. Um,
Is it Everything's Eventual? Is that the.
that's it. It's Everything's Eventual, not Nightmare and
Yeah, it
Dreamscapes.
just
Everything
popped
is
in my head.
Eventual. Thank you. That's the book, and that's why I need Aaron here. Aaron,
Mm-hmm.
where are you?
Hey, Ron.
Right. Um,
AA Ron.
No, so that is the next two arcs we're gonna do. Is we're gonna do, and there is a debate because it is a short story. We might read the short story first, versus like doing the comic, because I feel like that's the better way to interpret that story. Like, and I do remember they did a good job with the comic, but they do a really good job with the comic. But I want to say that the story is a little better now. Um, yeah, but basically, I don't even know if I want to do the next like comic arcs because it's just I'm gonna have to literally for the Gunslinger the Journey Begins. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read them and I'm gonna if they don't have any new stuff that like any new content and it's just a Gunslinger all over again, then we're gonna skip it. We're gonna get to another Dark Tower adjacent book. We might because there are two that
Mhm.
there okay, there's two parts that I know have new content, and that's Shimi's Tale, which is a 2-issue series that like happens like 4 arcs from where we are. They for some reason they dropped it like after the drawing of the 3 or something like that. Okay, so there's Shimi's Tale, and then there's the extremely hard to find So Fell Lord Perth, which is the very, very end of all of these arcs. It's the last thing they dropped. It's just a one shot. Those we will do. We might, like, if I find out that none of these arcs have anything new in it, we're just going to touch base with those two, like, one shots, and that might be the end of the comic thing. I'm
Yeah,
going to
And
let
have
the
me know
funny
because
uh,
thing
then
is,
that'll.
I remember reading So Fell Lord Perth. That one actually falls after Battle of Jericho Hill.
mm.
Hmm.
So that might how this goes. It might be like we might do Battle of Jericho Hill, Little Sisters of Allura, the 2 one shots, and that might be the end of the comic series. Especially if none of the gunslinger stuff. If it's just illustrated, that's nice and everything. But if it doesn't have any new content, there's no point.
Yeah, Evil Ground, I think, is a 2-issue short series too.
I have to look. I know there's still some one shots. They did the trade for all the one shots. I forget what it's called, but it's called like the Dark Tower one shots or the Dark Tower like I forget. Because there's 2 books that we won't touch base on. They did like a Dark Tower almanac in comic form,
Yeah,
and
it's
it's
called End World Almanac.
yeah, and it's basically just a glossary and appendix of characters and locations and stuff like that, maps. But
Yeah, it says here it's
there's
companion releases. And there's
yeah,
the
and there's
Gunslinger Born sketchbook. There's Marvel Spotlight, The Dark Tower, Gunslinger's Guidebook, End World Almanac, Guide to Gilead, and then the drawing of the 3 Revenge sampler.
yeah,
That's the compendiums.
all those we won't touch base on because it's exactly what they sound like. They're just it's either a compendium, which is just glossary items, just focusing on character names and stuff like that, where you can find them throughout the books. And then it's like maps, sketchbooks,
They're
stuff like
making
that.
money. They're selling books.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I,
Um,
I was trying to see because it almost, if you do a Google search, it almost makes it sound like
what's up, Paul?
it's.
Thanks for stopping by.
It almost makes it sound like it's on the Marvel Unlimited app, which would have surprised me because none of the other stories have been on the Marvel Unlimited app, but I don't see it here either.
I found them on Wikipedia.
Yeah,
Really?
I haven't.
Yeah.
Look, I have to like. There's 2
And then
reading
I
lists.
screenshotted them, so then I have the whole list in front of me of all the books and the series and what they're doing.
Yeah, because I use that list, and then if you go on Stephen King's webpage, because Stephen
Yeah,
King
same
actually
thing with
has like
the books.
yeah, and
So it
Stephen
lists
King
all the books.
actually he actually has like a chronological order of how you're supposed to read all this. It like because the way they're published might not necessarily like for instance, the Little Sisters of Allura publication falls after the Gunslinger, so some of the things are out of order, but for the most part, I think it's lined up.
No, I meant just
Um,
being able to actually physically read it through the Marvel app.
that I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Read the
no,
books.
that's not what I'm finding.
It should be in theory because all limited series are supposed to be on the app, but with
No, no,
licensing,
none of the Dark Tower is on the app. I'll say this: it is it does. I've found that when you're not searching for straightforward. Like, well, really, if you're searching for anything on the Marvel Unlimited app, it's sometimes a little wonky.
Okay, so that is a thing where sometimes you have to put in different like search terms because sometimes you got to search for Stephen King, sometimes in Dark Tower, sometimes like because I've
Yeah.
had that issue.
Well, if you wanted the one shot, it's going for anywhere between $4 to, I think somebody on eBay is trying for $40, which good luck to them.
Oh, some of the one shots get expensive, like the one Steve has, because
Yeah, no, that's the one I was looking up.
yeah, I don't have that one. Like the Sorcerer is a one shot, and it is kind of a little hard to find, I'd say, but it's not that expensive. You can probably get it on because this one was a little more published versus the other one. But so
Yeah,
Lord
Shimi's
Perth,
Tale is expensive, and Lord
yeah,
Perth one was pricey too.
and it's because of the two facts that you can probably guess, like low print runs and
Scarcity.
like yeah, low print runs, and that being the end of the whole like shebang thing. Because after they did this, he jumps. Stephen King does another Marvel Comics limited series, and he does The Stand. And The Stand, I want to say they made it like halfway through, and then he gave up on The Stand. And then after The Stand, he went with IDW, and I think he did Sleeping Beauties.
Hmm.
Oh no! Before that, he did DC Vertigo. He did American Vampires with Scott Snyder, and then him and his son with IDW did Sleeping Beauties. So he's had. I mean, he's stuck in comics for a while. Like I want to say the past like 15, 20 years. He's kind of like every couple of years has dropped something. Maybe not necessarily through DC or Marvel, but because he had quite a bit with IDW for a while.
He sticks with whoever wants to pay the highest bidder at the point.
Yeah, basically. Trying to think. I think that's all I can say on this episode and this arc. I still enjoyed it, even though it's not exactly how I imagined it. And again, I think this is up for debate. Is this canon? To me, it is like the fact that it has Stephen King's name on it, kind of thing. But it's not necessarily written by him, which is kind of something I like. I kind of would like for this franchise to get to a point where they do allow other writers to come in and add, because Stephen King, even though he is still with us, I mean, he's getting up there in age, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Would y'all like to add anything to anything? Any thoughts? Yeah.
No, I'm pretty much in the same boat. I accept it as canon only because what's the alternative? Like,
Yeah,
no, it didn't
nothing.
happen that way.
Yeah. I read this stuff and now I have to forget it. Damn it. And that has happened. I'm looking at Dragon Ball GT. And the Star Wars original expanded universe. I'm looking at you right there, buddy.
But yeah,
now,
I'm just like, let's see what happens next.
I'm super excited for what comes next. I don't, like I said, I don't remember it, but I mean, it is the focal point of this whole comic series. It's led up to this specific arc, so I'm super excited to get there. Yeah, but this is this episode of Walk Along the Beam. I think we've said all we can about this specific arc. And if not, put it down in the comments. We'll touch base on it in the next episode, kind of thing. The guys, I want to thank y'all, my panel, especially. I love these episodes. I look forward to them, and just the conversation that goes down. It's so fascinating. But guys, thank y'all for being here in the chat. Thank y'all for showing up. And guys, that's it. We're out of here. Yeah. Long days, pleasant nights, all that good stuff.